When he signs that document, again, we already know this. Immediately, production goes up by 50%. Immediately in our country. Within a year, it doubles. Once that happens, the price gets cut by more than 100%. That's a reduction in inflation that we just have not seen, right? So when I look at these government inefficiencies and regulations and opportunities, we will see, mark my words, we will see the average consumer by the end of the summer of 2025 have an increase of 25% more spendable income in their wallet.
Introducing Zach Davis and Josh Anderson with the Sound Money Podcast.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Sound Money Sound Principles Podcast. My name is Josh Anderson alongside Zach Davis. How are you, Zach?
I'm good, Josh.
Man, today is an exciting day. We have a special guest back with us today for our listeners. Back about, I think, episode 3 or 4. You have to go back and look. We had what we consider to be the world's smartest software engineer, Anthony Webb, with us then. You got a chance back then to learn a little bit about his story and who he is and his genesis in business. And if you haven't had an opportunity to listen to that podcast, it's actually tremendous. My wife said to me after that podcast, you should have him on more. He's really smart, which kind of made me feel like we're really dumb, Zach. But so welcome, Anthony. Glad to have you back with us today for a really special topic that we're just, I don't want this to become this, this isn't a red-blue discussion. This isn't a political Republicans, Democrat discussion today, but we're coming out of a election cycle that was pretty nasty, pretty wild, pretty crazy, where we saw a lot of hate and discontent across the country. But I just, as entrepreneurs, the three of us have been involved with each other and in lots of, and not with each other in, I would dare say, over 150, probably 200 business ventures in our life, and real unique opportunities and things that we've seen and we've been a part of and we've done. First of all, for both of you, after the election, what kind of optimism or lack thereof did you feel?
Yeah, to me, it just
speaking as an entrepreneur. Go ahead.
As an entrepreneur, it feels like there's this sort of cloud that's lifted. Like a lot of my business friends and associates, just they were getting very, very. They didn't have a lot of positive outlook, and now they do, right? And it's starting to feel like there's some excitement again, and which is interesting because you talk about the red-blue thing. Like, I'll just say this on the outset of the podcast. I think this is really important because we don't want this to be about a red-blue thing. That's over, right? So if you're an entrepreneur right now, you should not care who's in the office. The time to care about that was back when you were deciding who you're going to vote for. Your job now is to put away all of your emotions and your feelings and figure out how you're going to win in this environment. And that's the same for every election cycle, right? So, and I think that there's a lot of people that are figuring that out now, going, okay, I've heard the policies that they're going to do. I'm excited about these things. I think there's some fear and trepidation also with some of the things that might happen. But overall, I'm feeling optimism from lots of my business friends.
It's funny. I was thinking about this the other day. I was talking with my wife, actually, after the election. I wouldn't consider myself someone who's overly political. I don't really have a lot of discussions about politics, even with people business associates. And I would say that that's not a lot of the thrust of my thought process. And it was kind of interesting because I came out of the election cycle, and the next day came, and I found myself feeling and I didn't realize maybe how the stress internally that I was feeling as we headed into this. I mean, I knew that there was a lot of big decisions to be made and these types of things, but I think that for me, I just felt a lot of optimism. I felt coming out of that, okay, let's go. We got this. And so such optimism looking forward, to really, and kind of get another chance at, really taking off and doing something really great. And I think that, like, for me personally, this is something that has just really invigorated my emotions, and really given me a really a good platform to go forward and say, how can I win here? I like how you said that, Zach. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, is seizing opportunities and really working with the cards that have been laid out and dealt. And I think that we're all going to be looking at a different deck than we've ever had before.
It's interesting you say that, both of you, because we've spoken on previous podcasts. 2024 for all of Zach and I's business ventures, and the ones we're involved with Anthony as well. It's been a not a good year, right? Like, it's been a down year in all those ventures across the board. And I sat in my hot tub and I watched the sun come up after the election. Only slept for like 3 hours, but I sat there, I watched the sun come up, and all the same pressures existed that morning that have in the last quarter of 2024, whether that be a lack of sales in some businesses, whether that be bloated inventories because of those sales, whether that be external pressures from, overstaffing in some of those entities. All those pressures existed, right? None of those pressures went away that morning. But as the sun rose, I had this overwhelming sense of optimism. Like you just said, Anthony, like overwhelming sense of optimism. Like none of the pressures went away, but everything felt different. I haven't felt that in years in business, right? This overwhelming sense of, oh, we're going to win. And in 2008, a candidate that I didn't want to win won an election. I can remember watching the sun come up that morning in Hawaii on the North Shore, standing on the beach of the North Shore, a candidate I didn't want to win. And I threw a little pity party for a minute, right? And then I had another sense of optimism. I went, to your point, Zach, I remember clearly looking at this rock that looked like an alligator. And I can remember looking at that rock, and I can remember thinking, well, he's not, or she's not, but in this case, he's not going to change whether I win or I lose in life. And with his policies, there's going to be opportunities that come up that I don't even know exist yet. And guess what? They did. But this time I woke up and I just went, man, there's going to be opportunities that come up, and the environment is about to change where we can win even more. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about today, right? We invited Anthony on because I go all the way back in my mind. I think it was around 2008. Anthony came to me all excited and he said, man, have you been following this crazy entrepreneur genius named Elon Musk? I think it was 2008. You told me this. I had no idea who this cat was, or you couldn't even find anything on the internet about this guy, because I wasn't in what I would consider to be like kind of the geek squad over here, like the really smart people. You have to go dig around and find where they're talking. But you told me about him in 2008, and you said this guy's going to change the world, and he was making a couple of rockets back then,
yeah.
But now everyone knows who he is in the world, this Elon Musk character. And I thought, you know what? Why not get on the podcast, the guy who told me about him clear back then, and ask a couple really poignant economic questions and business questions. Questions like, Donald Trump's come out and said that he's appointed to a new department, a new area. Mr. Elon Musk and Vivek, and this department is going to be, I think it's D.O.G.E, Department of Government Efficiency.
I think that's right.
Is that why he built the coin, by the way? Was there some foreshadowing of Doge coin? Come on, Anthony, your insider's got to know.
It's so crazy.
It is crazy that we had a Doge coin, but whatever. So what is it about that and those two men and heading up this new department that has guys like, what is it? First of all, because we might have listeners that have no idea what it is. Yeah. What is it? And why do you think how do you think it could change the business landscape?
Yeah, I think for me, I think one of the really interesting things is, when I say that I sense a lot of optimism, you know, we've been through a presidency with Trump previously to date. And I wouldn't say that like my optimism is fully just geared around, oh, we know what we're getting. This is a president that had XYZ happen. But I think that there's something just vastly different about what we're going into. And really what it is, it comes down to the plan around who's going to be at your side through this. Because I think presidents are defined not necessarily by themselves, but by who they surround themselves with, right? And we have, and I've often thought this, I'm like, gosh, there's such smart people out there in the world. And there really are people who could add so much. These are not people who are going to drop everything that they do to come and join politics, right? And I feel like in some ways, there's probably politicians listening, and for this comment, I'm going to get lambasted, but I feel it's kind of like those who can do, right? And those who can't fall back to politics almost, or to some other areas. And I feel like the politics, in my estimation, they haven't gotten the sharpest tools that our country has to offer, because those people end up going into private sector and into other things, and they largely look at politics as a huge mess that they have no interest in trying to even mix themselves up in, and they don't want to go down into the mud, and they don't want to play with the pigs and everything else. And so I've lamented this of like, man, there's some good guys that would be so well qualified to come in here and run this country. And wouldn't it be great if they could be involved? And I guess I always thought that, like, you have a politician who immediately starts appointing other politicians. And like, to me, seems like such a big miss. And I didn't even consider that it would be possible that a president would come in and he would actually persuade the brightest and the very best people to come in and try and solve a hard problem, right? Politics and the affairs of our country is incredibly, incredibly difficult. And it's a hard problem to solve. But I think that the only way that we will see change, or that we could see change, is through bringing in an A team and a hit squad of people who are not only capable enough, but they also don't have anything to lose, right? It's not their political career on the line type thing. And so in a lot of ways, my optimism wasn't because, oh, here comes Donald Trump again. That wasn't the seed of my optimism. What the seed of my optimism is I think he might do this differently, right? And maybe differently than anyone's ever done it. And so in this case, he started to, come up with this team, right? And I look at Elon Musk, and love him or hate him. I mean, there's a lot of people, you don't arrive at that status and at that, echelon without offending a lot of people, or making a lot of mistakes and in the public eye even, right? But there's a lot of things that you can't argue with what he's accomplished, and even especially as of late. Take, for example, like a Twitter, right? He comes in and he immediately axes 70% of the people in that company, right? And first of all, everyone thought he was crazy to pay $44 billion for the platform, right? And they said this was just, it was almost a joke, right? And then it became real. And then everyone's like, well, what's next? And then there was 70% of people who instantly were looking for something else to do. But what it really, and consequently, there was a lot of, oh, he's doing it all wrong. He doesn't get it. He's not fit to run this company, But what hindsight has shown, and what we know now today, are that that was part of the process to fix that company. That was part of the process to tear things down, to build them back up the right way, and to get people's attention, and to make sure that the team that he had we're riding for the brand and really pulling on the same oars. And so I think that, you know, and consequently, you have other companies in Silicon Valley and around the world who took a long look at their teams and said, hey, maybe we have some fat here that we need to figure out, right? And some of them followed suit, right? And it's overall has been, I think, healthy. And it, you know, it's not looked back on it with, you know, in hindsight now as nearly as drastic as it was. And so I think that there's like, when we start talking about efficiency, I do know that there is no one who understands the process of it better than Elon Musk. He's been in the trenches and gone through this now many, many times. Now, it is the people that I've talked to, right? There's a lot of people really scared about this gentleman too, right? And for good reason. They think, you know, change should happen rapidly local, but on a national level, it should be slower. It should be Titanic. We want to measure twice and cut once, and we don't want to make the mistakes. And so I think that there's a lot of people who fear that he might make a really, really brash decision. And I suspect that that just in that thought of, oh boy, might cause more change than any politician has ever inflicted in our economic, you know, outlook and outlay, right? And so for me, it's healthy, right? I don't know what his plan is immediately, right? I'm sure, but what I do know is that he will go in there and he will do his measurements. He's not going to go out there and just, you know, be off the cuff about it. But I think that he will measure twice. He will make some waves, and he will enact change that no other politician ever could. And for me, that's exciting, right? I think that we need that. I think that it's a long time coming. And I think without that, I think that, you know, I don't know whatever would be the catalyst to cause us to really take a hard look and really start to dive into how do we fix this thing.
I recently listened to him on a podcast where I came to this conclusion, right? A lot of people when he bought Twitter for the 44 billion, like you said, thought it was crazy, thought, you know, that's the most ridiculous thing. And he was being asked the questions, right? In hindsight, like why he did it, right? And the question that was posed to him is, did you do it to save free speech? And he's actually said, well, that wasn't my primary purpose when I set out, right? Now looking back, right, we've learned some things about him and that process. If you remember, the very first thing that he came out and did once he got in the company, like he went in and acted as a CEO, you know, laid off all the people, went to work, like he figured it out. In the process, he went through their files and found out, oh my goodness, they did have the FBI a login right into their system. They did have fact checkers who were arbitrarily throwing out information and having actual disinformation. And if you remember, he said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to have the Twitter files. I'm going to release all of the documents of the company. I'm going to share every email. I'm going to share every data point. I'm going to share it. And of course, right, there were people really upset about that because there was some quite shady things going on. Yeah. But he said through that process, he said, I did start to save the First Amendment and the freedom of speech because nobody had ever opened those doors. I believe, right, because past has shown us that he did that. I'm really interested to see in many departments, right? This new D.O.G.E organization, it can oversee all departments. What are we going to learn through transparency, right? Like in the past, right, we've had these FISA requests, right, where you as the public, I as the public, we can go out and we can make a request to get the emails of the Department of Defense or an ambassador in China, right? But right in the past, right, everything said, well, it's classified and they don't release them. But we have this process in America through our constitutional process and our law process that the public can do those things. I have no doubt through his past experience that he's going to build a transparent system. And just like the Twitter files, right, in his own private company saying, I'm going to kick the doors open. Here's anything you want to see, you can see. As the public, we're entitled to see that for all organizations. Man, I can't wait to see what the FTC has to say, right? Can't wait to see their damn emails and what they're saying about companies in the world and their internal communications, because that's going to be made public and it's never been done before. It's coming.
Yeah.
And what it's going to change the way regulation and the way people interact with government agencies forever to the future, I believe.
Yeah.
Zach, any thoughts around that?
Yeah, and I think too with what's going to happen in there, you know, to Anthony's point, just the thought. I think you're going to see some organizations start to evolve and change. I wish I had more optimism that we would see big change in the organizations themselves just by the thought of them saying we're going to get looked at really heavy, right? If you listen to last week's podcast, we talked about employees, right? And you start looking for the employees that you're going to cut, and all employees in the government, these agencies have to be thinking right now, are we going to get cut? Right? Are our budgets going to get cut? Is my job going to get lost? So you would hope that there would be some change. I'm not as optimistic as I probably should be, because the government is the most inefficient system and is the absolute worst at efficiencies and productivity and whatnot. And people, they get entrenched in that idea of the law says I have 6 weeks to do my job. I'm going to take 6 weeks, when the private sector would have it done in 2 days. Right. So, but I think there is going to be some things in a lot of these different agencies where he's not going to have to go in and make these huge swinging cuts with some things, because I think some of these heads of these agencies are going to say, we better clean this up ourselves, right? And we better get in line with our budgets, and we better get more efficient, because everybody learned, like you said, from Twitter, he paid $44 billion and then almost killed his company by cutting 70%. He didn't pay anything for the government. Now he pays $10 billion in taxes every year, right? But he didn't pay anything for these organizations that he's going to go into. So for him, there is no personal repercussions to go, okay, here's the Department of Energy. Here's their budget. Here's where they're spending it on. Half. Right? Like, there's no immediate recourse to him in his own balance sheet. So he's going to have if Trump lets him do it, he's going to have a big sword. I think there's some people that are pretty afraid of that. I hope he will wield it wisely. I think he will, but there is going to be some pain in this too, because there's going to have to be some things cut and some restructuring and the rebuilding of it. You know, there's going to be some things to navigate. So, but I think overall it's going to be good. It's going to be good pains to go through.
You know, we recently, we've talked on this podcast in the past, right? If you're not embracing change in the future, and if you're not using the latest technologies, you're going to get beat, right? Most of you don't know, all of this podcast on the back end is fully generated by AI, right? We come on, we make the recordings, we have the guests, but outside of that, we utilize all AI technology to edit, post, document, clip at every level. That's what we use. And when you have somebody who's one of the founding fathers of those kind of technologies, if I remember, Anthony, why don't you tell the listeners, they probably don't know, like Elon Musk's experience with AI, open AI, and his involvement there and some of those things. Give them a brief history lesson, because that's who we're asking to come in and help find efficiencies in government. And government's not using any of these technologies in most departments.
Yeah.
What will that do moving forward?
Well, I think that one of the things that we know, and I was talking with some other people kind of about the role of like how to solve problems, right? And what is the process by which problems are solved? And I've said this before, that the solutions that you come up with are only the success of those outcomes is only as good as the data that you made those fixes from, right? So it starts with really raw, unfiltered, great input, right, to generate a favorable output. And Elon and you know, many of the people who are in this space, they understand the difficult task this is, because when you talk about some of these decisions, the inputs into these, like we run businesses, right? And we know kind of the 10 things we're looking at, right? And we look at those indicators, we look at those things, and we usually maybe even unravel that a little bit deeper and go deeper into those, but we can get our head around it. There are some of these entities and some of these organizations that it's not possible for a person to go and unravel and extract all of the information to be able to present with the right solution in the right order quickly enough, right? And so I do believe, like you alluded to, Josh, that Elon has a great wealth of knowledge. You know, he was one of the founding fathers of, you know, what is now ChatGPT, OpenAI, you know, this project. And, you know, and he's even now has spun off his own, you know, Grok and all these other things, not to mention his experience with Tesla as it relates to AI. But I think that it's just the experience of knowing when I have a mountain of information that I need to reason about and that I need to understand, the best way to do that is with technology. The very best way to organize it, to collect it, and to reason about it is with technology. And I think that, like, some of the old suits that are in these political offices and other places, you know, I do believe that our government is still run on a yellow notepad in a lot of ways, relatively speaking, right? These are not organizations that are set up to win technologically. They're just not. They don't have the right team, right? And so as we talk about appointing people to come in and solve these, they see the world through a different lens. They have, for them, solving big problems that have a lot of inputs and a lot of data is a daily part of their life. And so I think that there will be no task that's too big. I don't think that there's any sort of, you know, and thankfully we live in a day and age where this is all really achievable by us. And I think that, like, Elon's going to use those tools and he's going to use those skill sets, and we'll see the benefits of people who are well-tuned and able to really capitalize on the latest and greatest that we have today. So I'm excited to see, you know, kind of where they go with it.
I want to,
and you know what? Let me give you an example of that. I had to look this up because I couldn't remember the numbers. This is crazy. Talk about the inefficiencies and the yellow pad deal. Okay, so the Pentagon has a $3.5 trillion budget. Okay, there's AI that can go fix this. A $3 trillion budget. They have failed the last, 7 years of audits. They have failed. They don't know where 61% of that $3.5 trillion is. That is a government inefficiency, right? So you talk about 61% of 3.5 trillion taxpayer dollars. They don't know where it went. This issue's been flagged since 1991. I mean, it's crazy. 20% accuracy on average in their reporting of what they have. And the Pentagon is in charge of, like, parts for planes and all of these types of things for building this stuff, right? So, I mean, it's crazy. You start looking at this number and you go, they overstated their budget by 202. They thought they had $202 million worth of parts more than what they actually had.
And we'd be bankrupt. If we ran a business like that, we'd be bankrupt, right?
Absolutely.
And the government doesn't have to pay that piper, right? And that's where I think that there's going to be great opportunity.
Well, yeah, because they fail an audit and there's no recourse. They get off budget. They make sure you don't fail an audit. And if you do fail an audit in your own personal life, they just take more money from you, right, to fix their problems. That's one of the things I hope really comes out of this for the benefit of the taxpayer, is that the government can no longer just come to the taxpayer and say, we don't know where 60% of $3.5 trillion went, so we're raising your taxes to try to raise more money to our pet projects.
and I'm a firm believer. I want to pivot for a second. I'm a firm believer that we have never seen a reduction in inflation in America. I really believe, this is my heart of hearts, I actually believe this, that if you actually turn business people loose on budgets and accountability, oversight, these things we're talking about, and then also regulation, that we could actually be entering into the first period of my lifetime where in the next 4 years, we could actually see a decrease in inflation. Because if you take and you find and you actually account for $1.5 trillion that's missing for one entity in the government, that trickles down to every household in America. Every household in America, eggs cost less than bacon costs less, gas costs less, right? If that money is not being misspent, if it actually stays in the taxpayer's pocket. If you take things like the energy sector and you come in and you know, Zach and I are intimately involved in that sector. By changing on opening day of a new president, changing one tax loophole that the last administration signed on their day one, by repealing it alone, your gas prices at your pump are going to drop by 50 cents immediately. And that simple piece of paper, all it states is a loophole that gets reinstated in the tax code that allows drillers to reinvest their money tax-free into new wells. When he signs that document again, we already know this. Immediately, production goes up by 50%. Immediately in our country. Within a year, it doubles. Once that happens, the price gets cut by more than 100%. That's a reduction in inflation that we just have not seen, right? So when I look at these government inefficiencies and regulations and opportunities, we will see, mark my words, we will see the average consumer by the end of the summer of 2025 have an increase of 25% more spendable income in their wallet, which means every business, we have businesses, all three of us have businesses that we are highly effective. When the consumer has an extra 25% in their wallet, we're highly effective at getting them to spend it with us, highly effective at it. And that's what makes the world go round. And so for me, I'm beyond excited about the future because I know that the consumer will have more money in their pocket by the end of Q2 2025. Absolutely no question about it to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that part of it too is it's like as we fix those things, we as Americans can reinvest in our infrastructure, both from a technological standpoint. I see tremendous opportunities, but there's been just so much of this in whether it be manufacturing or other businesses that really just hasn't landed here, and it's because of the landscape, really. I mean, we've found that it ends up going overseas, or it's going out our back door, and we really can't do much about that, right? Well, I think that with the right economic structure and with the right guidance, that we can start to see those shifts. I mean, reducing inflation is going to be something that is going to be a catalyst for all sorts of verticals, right? It's not just just the small businesses, right? But it's the big businesses that are actually finding that they can keep more business local. They can keep stuff closer to home, and that will further spur this, and it's kind of it's a snowball effect, right? And so as bad as it can get quickly, it can get good quickly too, right? It can get good quickly. It's going to take some time, put things on the rails, and to add, these changes. But I couldn't be more excited.
I'm interested you say this, and I want to pivot a little bit. We had a podcast a few weeks ago with a tradesman, right, who has taken a new approach. Podcast with Thomas Causey, a gentleman who's started an electrical business, but now has gone out and merged and acquired lots of electrical and HVAC businesses. Had a conversation following the election with two different groups of people, and I was asked to speak to this group of 19 to 25-year-old young men. I was asked to give them some insight of everything that we do in the world, what we see is opportunity for them if they didn't want to get a traditional job. They didn't want to get a traditional education, that meaning a bachelor's degree or master's degree, whatever.
The professionals.
I let all of them know, given the new political landscape, and I gave this message 2 days after the election. I said, given that, any of you who love welding, you need to go into it. There are going to be endless jobs in the American steel industry over the next 4 years with projects in oil and gas, projects in manufacturing, projects along the border. For those young men, like if you have a tendency, you like that, opportunity will abound. Get ready. If you're someone who is wants to be an electrician, wants to be a plumber, wants to be an HVAC, opportunity will abound in this new, what I consider to be, this ain't my words. Some of the most powerful men in the world are out of Silicon Valley right now are saying that we're about to enter a golden age of prosperity. By the way, the gentleman who started Obama's super PAC, who also was one of the most influential people in Google's history, said, because of this election, we are about to enter the golden age of prosperity that we have never seen before. So if you are a tradesman or you have those desires, now is the time to get certified. Like if those are the things that you like, now is the time. There are opportunities that will abound in that space. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're like us, there will be more opportunities for you than there's ever been if you just watch, if you just pay attention, and if you just participate. Because the consumer will have more money and the opportunities will be everywhere. You just have to be willing to pick what you want to do and race, because there's a clock. Like everything, there's a clock tied to it, and the opportunity is right now to race. And so, thoughts around any of those comments as we look to wrap up today?
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% right, Josh. I mean, I already look, the world knows, right? It's interesting because one of our businesses, we order a part out of China, and I got an email 5 days after the election from the manufacturing company and said, hey, Chinese holiday coming up. We take all January off, or December. I can't remember what it is, but they were basically saying, with President Trump being in office, you're going to have tariffs. Right now is the time to put all your orders in before the tariffs hit you. So, I mean, the world knows it, right? And it's like, we're going to have to start making some decisions as business people going, do we want to pay those tariffs? Or do we want to start paying a company that is manufacturing that product here, right? And in the past, you want to buy from American companies. But the challenge is, you look at it and you go, I am so burdened with taxes that come off the bottom line, the top line, that I can't afford to spend the extra money to buy an American product because our manufacturing is too expensive over here because they're so burdened with taxes, right? And it's like, it's just this spiral of death. So you have to look elsewhere to find these products because you have to keep the business alive. It's not because you hate the American manufacturing industry. It's because your business can't survive by buying those American products. So we're going to start seeing, I think, manufacturing companies pop up all over the place. There's already several companies that have announced that they're bringing products back over here. And companies that have never produced, by the way, companies who have never, I forgot who it was, I go look it up, but I just read an article the other day, a company that's never been in the United States, it's been over in Europe, that is now building a manufacturing plant in America, because they believe that there's going to be more opportunity over here in America in the next 4 years than there ever has been. So lots of opportunities if you're looking.
Yeah, I think too. I think part of what excites me about it is it seems like, I think that we are entering into a stage where we're kind of setting aside politics and we're just finding problem solvers, right? We don't care about where they come from, what their background is politically. We really care about their aptitude and their ability to solve the problem. And I think that, like, a lot of times we talk so much about, red and blue and which is better, but at the end of the day, it really comes down, for me, is who is the most qualified and the smartest and the sharpest pencil to come in here and really enact change and really solve this problem. And I think that that's where we're headed. And I think that and I hope that really what comes out of it is that politicians everywhere, that they look around themselves in, even on a local level. If I'm solving a problem and I'm a politician, I want to surround myself with the smartest people. And they may not be politicians. They're probably not, right? But I want to surround myself with the very smartest people that know how to solve all the problems. And I think that we'll start to see that. And it really should be top down. Democrat, Republican, these people should be looking around them and finding opportunities to engage. And I think that because of this precedent that's really out there, I think we'll see more and more of this. And I really do, think that we're on the cusp of a snowball effect, that we will see the benefits of for years to come.
Well, and I
Go
think
ahead, Zach.
part of that, Anthony, too, is business as usual in Washington is going to be dead. Politicians have by and large created a business in politics. I think they just found their competitor, right? The business sector has just entered this space now, and politics in general, they're going to have to change their business model and how they enrich themselves and their own lives, and what money really can be made in politics and not be made in politics, what backdoor deals can be made and not be made. So I think just overall into the future, this is going to be really good to disrupt the political landscape and that business model that lobbyists and politicians have created, where now all of a sudden you have some of these business guys coming in and saying, it's not going to run like that anymore. And I'm hoping that the American people are smart enough in the election cycle, if they can do what they can do, to say, we like how this is happening. We don't want to go back to business as usual with politicians.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, in business, whenever, Zach, whenever you and I come up against a really hard problem, like a really challenging problem, something that maybe the world hasn't done, it's a really difficult thing. We pick up the phone and our first call is always to Anthony Webb. Always. And then the next calls are to other industry experts that are just have dedicated their lives to whatever the problem is, right? I'm really excited that the political world is finally taking note of how business does that. When there's big problems, you go to the big experts. For the first time, I feel optimism that we're taking that approach in Washington, D.C. And if it works, it's going to be phenomenal, because it works in business every day. When you get the smartest minds together, people that are much smarter than us, and you get them working on a problem, pulling the same direction on the rope, miracles happen. Like, things change, mountains move, impossible things become possible. And that's what makes us so excited about the entrepreneurial future that we have before us in the world. So really appreciate the conversation today. It's been excellent to listen to. If you're a listener today, I hope you saw some rays of sunshine and you're figuring out how you're going to participate in the world, because there's opportunity abounds around you. So until next week, Josh Anderson, Zach Davis, special guest Anthony Webb, want to say thank you for being with us, and see you
Thanks
next
for
time
having
on the Sound Money Podcast.
All right. See you guys.
Yeah.